diversity. It is my pleasure to welcome the moderator, Mr. Tarun Katyal, ex-CEO Z5, and our lineup of panelists, Mr. Gaurav Rakshit, Co-Chair, Digital Entertainment Company, IAMEI, COO, Viacom 18 Digital, Mr. Amish Tripathi, diplomat, author, and columnist, and Ms. Priya Kumar, screenwriter, writer, and motivational speaker. A very warm welcome to you all. Over to you, Mr. Katyal.
Maybe I jumped the gun, but welcome everybody. Good evening, and thank you so much for being on the other side of this streaming vehicle. A new one every time, but I think these are exciting times, and I have an extremely exciting panel with me here. When Gaurav and me discussed that we should do a diversity panel, we couldn't think of people better than Amish and Priya to bring on to this conversation. And our 1 year of work around content moderation, self-regulation, and all of that resulted in some of what's being seen in the ecosystem today. And we wanted to have a fairly, introspective discussion with two very prominent writers on what they think about creativity, diversity, storytelling, inspiration, so that we can lay to rest any doubts that are there in the creative ecosystem about what will be the fate of content and writing in the future, considering that there is going to be some sort of self-regulation, considering that there is going to be some sort of mindfulness on all our behalves about the way we present our ideas, our stories, characters, and concepts. So thank you everybody for being here. Gaurav was my co-chair for all of 2020, a very landmark year in many ways beyond the COVID in the digital entertainment and in the digital content space. But Amish, who I've known for some time, and Priya, who I've known for very long, I have a lot of respect for their writing. And, we're going to dwell some more with the three of you in understanding what you think is going to be the future of creativity, and with that, the element of right brain, left brain, without right and left ideologies about what is going to be the meaning of diversity and where we're going to go from here. So tell me, Amish, and tell me, Priya, what does creativity really mean to both of you? All of you channel a lot of ideas through different lenses. Give me a perspective of what goes into your head when you start writing a new story, when you start thinking of a new concept and idea.
I think Priya should go first. No, Priya.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So for me, creativity means freedom. As an author, you have the authority to write what you want. I mean, generally in life, when you talk about a professional standing, it is always, doing what the other person expects. And I think writing is a rare profession where you get to create your own world. And I feel as much as we talk about creativity, it is also a position of great power because you decide the plot. You're actually creating a whole new life, a whole new world, different characters, and so on. Did I hang? Because all of you seem to be hanging.
Go on.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So it brings a great understanding of life, and generally the stories that I write, it starts with a thought of something that I'm trying to solve, somewhere that I am stuck, that I have a problem. So very cleverly, I give that problem to my character and solve it for him or her. And in that journey, I'm able to find answers. And surprisingly, that's something what my readers also say, that they found their answers in the journey and the life of my character. So that's the starting point. And I think everybody who really wants to take charge and control of their lives should be an author. And when done enough to a large degree, there settles in a lot of control in your own life. And that's what is the greatest gift of creativity in my perspective.
So some really nice words: freedom, charge, control. I'm going to pick them up. Let's go to Amish first. And Amish, tell us, where does your germ of creativity come from?
There is the left brain. I mean, going by the modern scientific theory. There is the left plane, which is logical, rational, scientific, mathematical, the kind of life I led as a banker. And there is the right brain, which is intuitive, which is instinctive, on which rational, logical steps, things just emerge just like that. In our ancient Indian way, the left brain was associated with Lord Shiva, and not as Ardhanarishwar, but in his masculine form. And the right brain was associated with the mother goddess. Right? It is always believed, even in modern scientific, that the right brain is far more powerful, but the language center is in your left brain. Right? So the right brain can think, but you need the left brain to be able to tap into it and then communicate it. That's a scientific approach. Our ancient approach to creativity used to be that the mother goddess is the source of all creativity, and our task is to channel the blessings that come from her, either directly or through her husband Lord Shiva, right? So creativity in that ancient Indian sense is like getting in touch with the divine, where you can't really explain it, right? What you do with your left brain, what you do with banking, you can know you do these steps and ye hoga. Creativity you can't explain kahan se aata hai. You ask any writer or anyone in the creative space, a musician, anyone, if you ask them to explain ki bhai, where is the inspiration coming from? How do you create something from nothing? If they're actually speaking the truth, they can't give you a logical answer. We can't explain where it comes from. It just comes, right? It is like a blessing. If it's a blessing, then it's in some way a connection to the divine. So in my mind, the blessing of a creative person is not so much what the readers or the listeners or the viewers take from it. That's secondary. The really powerful thing is that it helps me connect in some way to the divine. I mean, that is the real journey, which is why I truly love writing. I mean, everything that I do outside of writing is something that I'm forced to do. I have to market my books, otherwise, the publisher has to recover his advances, blah, blah, blah. But what I truly enjoy is writing, because it's in some ways almost spiritual. Right? It's like it's a blessing which cannot be compared to anything else. That for me is creative. When ancient Greeks used to say that the muse is essentially a goddess. Your genius, the muse is a goddess who exists outside of you. So you can't say that I am the brilliant genius who's created it all. No. The muse is a goddess who exists outside of you, and your job as a creative person is to help your goddess to help you. Right? Open yourself up to that blessing. The touch of that blessing is so divine that you just love it. That's why most creative people you notice, like someone like Bhimsen Joshi, you see him perform, and you saw him perform on stage, his eyes would be closed, he wouldn't even care about the audience. This is the beauty, the true beauty of creativity.
I know, and I think it's a very good words, right? Priya, and you make the same points, but in very different ways. The blessing, the energy, the connection, the spirituality. Gaurav, some very good, as I would say, word cloud emerging here, right? And I think it becomes incumbent on somebody like you who runs a network and also the IMAI on how do you give enough body and enough options and enough choices to things like control, like the left brain and the right brain, to things like freedom and connections that writers want to make with their audiences, right? It becomes your responsibility to be able to protect all of what people like Priya and Amish want to present, but also be able to live without crossing a boundary or crossing a line and being mindful of what you're doing. So talk to us a little bit about you dealing with creativity and giving it wings.
Sure. Hard act to follow, these two in terms of creativity, but I think that creativity is inherent in all forms of work and work product. Certainly more so in authorship, where you have complete freedom and control. And I love the word that Priya was using. But I think that the way we work with creativity is really that for us, it's bringing alternate perspectives forward. And that's true whether we're operating in a business or we're doing storytelling and putting content stories forward, right? It's about putting alternate, compelling perspectives forward that cogently are attractive. And and you always have some constraints, and so whether it's in business, it'd be financial constraints, but you think about alternate ways to achieve your goals. When you go to our stories, your protagonists or the characters have constraints that are created in the worlds that we build for them, and then we start to figure out how do we solve them. I loved Priya's analogy of saying a real life problem that you can solve through a character and bring to real life. Those are incredible ways to think about creativity. And simple examples in our world, we don't get to write as freely. We're more, I guess, custodians of the writing. And but for example, in lockdown, you couldn't produce anything for love or money. And our team put together a show called The Gone Game. You guys may have seen it, where we shot it entirely in the actors' homes. They never met each other. The DOP was remote, the director was remote, their family members contributed, and it became a full-fledged show. And that doesn't, to me, that's also creativity, right? It wouldn't have been something when we didn't have those constraints. And so when you can look past and look beyond and sort of I guess imagine a future that's outside of what your limited worldview allows, then to me that's creativity. And so putting together that for us was creativity. But I recognize your question. I think it is to also nurture the true creative spirit that storytellers like them bring. And I think that it's incumbent on us to sort of create that platform for them to be able to tell those stories. I think OTT was a very and continues to be a very compelling way to tell some of these stories because it's not restricted by some of the constraints of broadcast, where you have to get the maximum eyeballs or what have you. You're able to tell big stories, small stories, niche audience stories, all kinds of stories. And so that, I think, is incumbent on us them to create that ecosystem that allows them to tell the most compelling stories.
Very well. Amish, I want to come to you. You took upon a genre of writing that classically had only been seen in scriptures, right? And people had seen books on mythology or on Indian gods and goddesses only, within the given spectrum of scriptures. But you made, that into a writing proposition, and your series is so immensely successful and popular. When you started on this journey, did you have any worries, any inhibitions? Did you think about how the society at large would react to it? Did you want to be a conformist, or you were ready to take this big step?
No, I don't mean it facetiously. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. That if you actually want to write a story like this, there's no better country than India to do it. Honestly, I mean it genuinely from the bottom of my heart. There is no problem in having a different interpretation in India, because unlike in most other cultures, India doesn't have the concept of one truth. That you have to follow this one truth, otherwise you'll go to hell and burn for eternity. I mean, it's a childish concept, frankly. India doesn't have that concept. India has the concept of multiple truths from times immemorial. Ekam sad vipra bahudha vadanti. Truth is one, but the wise speak it as many. As long as you do it with respect, there is no problem in having a different interpretation. My books are a completely different interpretation in many ways. I can tell you there are some scenes that you guys would think are there in the Ramayana or in the Mahabharata, which aren't there in the original version. So if I ask the three of you, is Lakshman Rekha there in the Ramayana? What would the three of you say? Is Lakshman Rekha there in the Ramayana? Is there?
Yeah, everybody said yes.
Priya, is there? Yeah. In the original Valmiki Ramayana, Lakshman Rekha is not there. There is no Lakshman Rekha in the original Valmiki Ramayana. And none of the other versions of the Ramayana, the first time you hear interpretation of the Lakshman Rekha is in the Ramcharitmanas, which is 400 years old. Our modern Indian conception Lakshman Rekha is based on a 1980s television serial.
Correct.
Where Lord Lakshman took that angle and drew it. So Ravan and Sagar made changes. No one got angry with it. Right? It's radically different. And this is just one small example. There are many examples like this. Across India, we intuitively understand, multiple truths. In North India, Lord Kartik is a bachelor. That's why he's called Kumar. In South India, he's married. He has 2 wives. So in North India, women don't enter Lord Kartik temples. In South India, women enter Lord Kartik temples. My mother, in South India, she'll enter Lord Kartik temple. In North India, she won't. Most of us Indians, especially the religious ones, get it almost intuitively. Multiple truths. As long as you do it with respect, that's a key thing. That's all. That there are often. Why haven't you heard any controversy around me on my books ever? I've been around for 10 years. Got 2 series out till now. Both of them put together have sold around 5.5 million copies. They're not really a secret. Have you heard even one controversy around me? I think honestly, if you write with respect and you yourself don't seek controversy, often artists seek controversy for publicity. You know that. It happens. If you don't do that, then controversies don't happen. India is actually one of the best countries to write different interpretations. I genuinely mean that. I'm a living example of it.
No, and I think and a great example, and this is precisely, I think, why, when we thought of this panel, we wanted you, because a lot of people have these fears about, are we going into an era where we are being intolerant about divergent views and so on and so forth. But I think the way you put it, which is that you've got to be true to what you're saying, you've got to be respectful and mindful, and we are a great country that allows diversity of views. I think you're a good and a living example of that.
And if I can just add, as an artist, you yourself should avoid controversy. Let's be honest, sadly, many of us artists ourselves create controversy to get free PR. Let's be honest. If we ourselves avoid it, it doesn't happen. More often than not, it doesn't happen.
Correct. You're manifesting some of this yourself. Tell me, Priya, you also write on very divergent views, right? And you've written about life and death. You've written about, afterlife. And do you at sometimes think that, am I crossing the line? Should I conform? Or do you write from your heart's will and end up discovering new chain of thoughts and you feel free about what you do?
See, like I said, that I didn't become a writer to write someone else's story or to add their viewpoint in my story. That's already done enough in life every day. So at least this world is my world. And when I started my career as a writer, I was told by publishers, hey, why are you writing fiction? Write self-help. You are in the business, and so those copies will sell more. And it was easy. It made practical sense. But that's not what I wanted to do. I mean, it was passion. It was coming from the heart. It was not from a business viewpoint. And then my first 2 books I wrote from the viewpoint of a woman. I understand that best. I look at life from that lens. And then the publisher said, I think your audience would grow wider if you put in a male protagonist, and then I wrote 3 books from a man's point of view. And surprisingly, they've sold more than the others, so, and because my books are in the genre of self-help, it means deeper understanding. It means a lot of inner dialogue. It means a lot of, because I have to make my character grow. All my books are in the genre of inspiration, spirituality. So obviously the guy has a lot of realizations. And surprisingly, over the years, nobody's turned around and told me men don't think like this, because it's a very different way of thinking. And I figured it's easy for women to understand how a man thinks. It's the reverse that is a little tricky. So, and I have never really been influenced by, I should add a character such as this. It happens in movies and so on, that because it's the trend or the hot topic or there is a whole revolution around it, include these sensitive subjects. I've never done that. I have included characters and plots that are needed for my character's journey. And it's very rooted in real life, that I'm not going to go out and do things just because I need to comply and fit in. I will do what is best for my journey. And to give you an example of, since you said I have written about life and death and afterlife, the book that became into a web series, I Will Go With You, became the final call. So the core of that was what happens after you die, because I was on a flight which everybody, including the pilot, was convinced is not going to make it, is not going to land. But I did. But you know what, I was so occupied with the responsibility that I didn't get to participate in that whole drama that I'm going to die. And it forever haunted me. What if the plane would have crashed? So I said, okay, let me overcome it and crash a plane in my story. So what would happen if I were dead? And you know what, writing that book was transformational for me, because I not only understood the value of life, relationships, but also understanding what can I do to keep the momentum going even after I am not there. So I started two initiatives after that, which will be kind of long standing after I am gone. So well, to answer your question, I have written about what concerns me the most. And somehow, and by the way, the publisher said, oh, I don't think people will get it, it's too heavy, it's too deep. Don't get it. It was made into one of the boldest web series to take up the topic of a thriller and spirituality together. So I think people underestimate others. While they think they're very smart, everyone else won't get it. How is that? So I think people are waiting for original content from the heart, because everyone feels the same way. And that has been the core of my connection with my readers.
I think Gaurav, both Priya and Amish made some very good points about being responsible, being spiritual, being introspective. But I also want to pick up from what Amish left, which is that do we seek controversy ourselves and then manifest it, and then it arrives into our life, and then we say, hey, we've got caught up and stuck in it. Now, you've dealt with these issues yourself. You're dealing with it individually on your own platform, but you're also dealing with it collectively through IMAI. Talk to me about, do you really believe that at some level, we as makers are somewhere manifesting controversy and then landing in the middle of it and then wanting to get out, or resisting it, or blaming somebody else for it?
So yeah, I mean, Tarun, you shepherded me into this, so you're as much supposed to give this answer as I am. But the reality is, I think that the platform did allow us to tell stories that were not seen before, at least based on the incumbent regulations. And I think where we both landed was that at least the framework that would allow us to continue needed to respect age, because I think age appropriateness was something that us and many people in the industry agreed that if, there is a responsibility that comes with the content that you put out. And so I think that was the thrust that we put towards the regulation. And I think the regulator saw that as well. So to that extent, because the kind of content that we were putting out was also not available anywhere else, that certainly gave a boost to the industry, if you will. And the responsible thing to do was to definitely put that behind an age gating, so that it didn't sort of compromise, young impressionable eyeballs and the like. So I think that we landed extremely well on that one. To the point about us courting controversy, to my mind, that is a little bit in the echo chamber that we operate in. We are a fairly incestuous community. Everybody knows everybody, and we keep talking to each other. But really, when you start to look at our consumers, not all of them are completely caught up in our little world of controversy and the stuff that we do. So I don't really think of it as being particularly effective courting controversy, other than sort of being on the headlines for a little while and the like. I think there is a genuine need to to tell original stories using the platform. I like the kind of freedom of expression that both of them have indicated. One of the challenges that we do have as a platform is the taking a story all the way from script to screen, or even pre-script, right? The entire content development process. is anywhere between 12 to 18 months, maybe 6 months if you crash it, whatever, right? And so that gestation period, as an industry, we can't afford to have upturn right at the end. And so now, given the new regulatory frameworks that are being talked about, we do need to pay additional attention at the head end of this process to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up. But what I liked in what they were saying was creativity doesn't have to do with sensationalism. Creativity is about pushing the envelope, and those are the kind of stories that we want to tell. That's what we really need as an industry. That is originality. That is creativity. So I think that part of what we want to do is live and well, and we're still shepherding that process as we speak, and we want to create that room for these guys to tell these stories.
No, and I agree.
Can I-
Sorry, go on, Amish. Go on.
Tarun, if I may add something to what Gaurav said, I agree with him. And, from a creative person's perspective, okay, there are average, like the hit of the year, there will be, an all-time hit, say something for the hit of the decade. And then there are movies or books which change paradigms completely, which change the way of thinking. Okay, like Mughal-e-Azam impacted the way of thinking of us Indians. Most of us Indians still think that Akbar looks like Prithviraj Kapoor, which is actually not true. Akbar would have looked Chinese to us, actually. He was Turkic, right? Or that Akbar spoke Urdu. He didn't speak Urdu. Urdu is an Indian language. He would have spoken Turkic.
Yeah.
But Mughal-e-Azam was like it was way beyond a super hit. It impacted a way of thinking, right? There are movies like this which come once. Make a list of movies or books like this. How many of them are actually about controversy? They're not. They certainly push the envelope dramatically. Right? But you'll notice controversy is like a fire. It'll burn up for a few months and then it'll go. Movies and books which change the way people think, which come only once in a generation, are actually beyond controversies. They are such that everyone wants to see them and it changes the way of thinking without them even realizing it. And that's what like a creative person truly wants, right? It's not about money for us. It's about like if you can have an idea which will last 50 years, what greater blessing is there for a creative guy?
No, I agree with you. And I was actually coming up from the point that you made, right, Amish? And I was going to ask Gaurav, and I was going to actually make a statement because Gaurav said that I'm as much in this crime or part of this entire controversy as he is. Is that I think the point you made about India being a country that tolerates many things is the fundamental good to this country, right? But you've got to be respectful for it. Now, and a lot of this is happening now, if you think that you need to edit something because you did something which is unmindful of a certain section of society, then I guess when you did it, you weren't being truthful about, being respectful to the society at large, right? You shouldn't have to do it if you so believed in it so much from the beginning. And I think a lot of your point you make about, things take 18 months to make and you've got to do this a little bit at the head end of it. I think, you and me also worked a lot with all the creative people as well as the platform to be able to bring some level of self-responsibility into everybody's mind. I think that understanding, if everybody develops, listen, we live in a plural society. We want diverse content. We want to be non-conformist. We want to be contrarian. But at some level, we also are in a society that needs to be mindful and be truthful about our concepts and about what we try to do. And we are not here to be malicious and hurt other people's sentiment because we think we'll get more viewership for our content or our books or our writing. I think that question we need to answer in our heads, yeah.
Just to balance that point of view, though, and it's interesting because we have a broadcast business which is heavily regulated in some sense, but the reality also is that even without intending to, sometimes you do end up offending the sensibilities of a particular community, one or the other, and we've seen that in our networks, Tarun. And so there, I think that we also, as a country, have developed a slightly more trigger happiness than we had perhaps a little while ago, and so we take offense more easily than we used to. Is It's just my observation.
No, and I agree with you.
Okay.
On that, I'd agree with Gaurav. There's a bit of, politics that comes in. A lot of it is just politics. But just to put it on balance, like I'm as liberal as they come. I support LGBT rights, I support women's rights. My latest fiction book, Suhail Dev, I showed a gay relationship, and not a caricatured gay relationship. There were two warriors in love with each other. They just happened to be, like, they just two men happened to be in love with each other. And it was in Suhail Dev. It didn't generate any controversy. It was a high-selling book of last year. It didn't generate any controversy at all. I'm sure you guys won't have heard any controversy. And it's actually one of the central themes that run through the book. Their characters, they're two warriors. They just happen to be in love with each other. That's it. That didn't generate any controversy. But on the other hand, what I would suggest is, like, we creative guys ourselves should, I'm as liberal as they come. But I saw a series in the UK. I've forgotten the name of it, but it was, young girls as young as 10 and 11 who were cheer girls. And it was almost sexualizing those young girls. And me as a completely liberal creative person, I was like, boss, ye kya kar rahe hai? ये थोड़ा अति है, ये थोड़ा ज्यादा है. You can't normalize sexualizing the kind of dances they were doing, the clothes they were wearing. I'm as liberal as they come. So this is something that we creative people ourselves should be mindful of. We ourselves should think, is this what we should put out? Like, young 10, 11-year-old, there's not an Indian series, it's a Western series. 10, 11-year-old girls, no, that's not all.
No, understandable. Priya, tell me, you've done a book and you've also worked very closely in converting that into a screenplay and so on and so forth. So tell me, when you go from a book to a screenplay, because you want to be more sensational, because you're on screen and you want to shout out loud, do you end up, mauling some characters, end up crossing some lines, or does that process end up doing some harm?
Well, it does more harm to the author if you don't let go. Because, your book now is in the hands of another creative person who has a bigger vision or a different take on the person's personality. So it's a very tough process for a writer to accept changes. Like for me, sometimes even when the book goes into second or third edition, I'm asked, do you want to make some changes? And I'm like, no, my characters are perfect. Everything is just right. I have lived with them. I have lived them. And then you have the director who says, no, we'll do it like this. And it's alarming that you don't know his story. You don't know him. So for instance, for the second season of Final Call, so my main protagonist is this really nice, endearing guy. He's a journalist and he does everything right. He's a righteous person. And now the director, makes him have an illegitimate affair. And it's all steamy. And I'm like, oh my God, what happened? So I have learned that, while I have written a book and it's been 3 years and 5 years, so perhaps my character has also grown. It's not that he's sitting dead in a book, so perhaps times have changed, and perhaps now he's been corrupted and a lot has happened since then. So it's okay. So, and I have learned really to let go. Like sometimes new characters are added which disturb my plot, which disturb my character and give him new problems which now they will solve. So I have sat endlessly in meetings, keeping an open mind, because if you don't, you'll have cardiac issues at the end of it. So just for health reasons and mental stability reasons, I think it's okay to say, this is yours now, and go ahead, make changes, but don't harm it so much that I would not have the pleasure of owning up to the story. So till there is my line, that I still want to like my character. It's okay if he has an affair, but put something right in that. Give him a very strong realization. So yes, it's
So very
tough, but
often,
you have to let go.
a lot of writers get into a very acrimonious relationship with the makers towards the end, right? One of the biggest
war.
hits of our times, Three Idiots, saw that entire thing,
Oh yes.
play out. And it's
Yes.
unfortunate because I think, the director's trying to be true to the script. The script is being trying to true to the book. The book is being trying to true to the original author's ideas and creativity. But obviously, it does dilute and takes different dimensions as you go along.
Right. My only ask in that entire process is, especially when we were doing the final call, I was allowed the liberty to be on set, and all I had was boxes of my books. I gave my books to everybody I would meet and say, just read it. Just read it. You will understand the emotion. Even if you're acting outward, you'll understand the core of the guy. So I ensured everyone read the book.
But
You know,
Priya,
I
would
was
you argue that the medium sort of speaks to a different part of the brain, right? The way words jump off a page is not the way the
Yes,
audiovisual medium reflects that, and so
absolutely.
screenplay will
Absolutely.
fundamentally be different
Yeah, of
in
course.
that sense. I mean, you can create suspense in a few paragraphs here, and then the director could take like minutes to do it, and it's vice versa.
having this conversation,
Right.
Gaurav, between Sucheta and Hansal for Scam, right? And they met a sum total of twice at all, from the book to the screen. She never came on to the set. She didn't know the actors. They just took the book and they separated themselves from each other, and that was it. And I was actually, putting Sucheta and Hansal together for another panel like this, and it was almost like I was introducing the two of them to each other. And Scam is what it is. It is one of the biggest hits of last year.
Is she happy with how it turned out?
She's happy, but she obviously had issues like Priya was talking about. While Priya was saying, I've detached, I could see the hands come together. So, Amish, I know you and me have discussed many times of converting some of your books, and I know that you are on the path with some of the makers in converting them. How do you feel about this?
Look, I can completely get what Priya is saying. Look, the thing with us authors is we tend to be control freaks, right? And democracy is a great way to run a country. It's a terrible way to run anything else. Yeah. Every project has to have one captain. You can't make a creative product by committee. So in a book, the captain is the author, the editor. Everyone can have their views when they're editing, but the decision maker is the author. In a movie, it should be the director, movie or a series. It's absolutely fair. That's the way it should be. So one should give one's inputs, but leave it to the director, because you try and make it by committee, it will be a disaster. Neither here nor there. One of the things I am experimenting with doing is I'm producing Swayze myself. We've just started, in fact, actually, the scripting stage right now. But Shiva Trilogy is a separate deal, so I'm trying both. Let's see how it goes.
Oh, very smart. I think the
Very cool.
production thing is something we should talk about separately. But Gaurav, tell me, this whole creativity by committee and creativity by consensus. A lot of this is being driven that now that we have some sort of regulation, when you put 5 people in a room together, they will have an overhang of the regulation and won't be able to bring out best ideas because they're already stopping themselves from pushing the envelope and so on and so forth. Are you feeling that? And are you sensing that?
I worry about it. See, some of the creative folks that I'm talking to that have read about these regulations, I think they're also seeing the pendulum swinging much further than it already has, and that happens sometimes when you have a new regulation. You're sort of trying to find what's the middle. They've gone to the other extreme, and that really compromises any form of storytelling, because you're so scared that you want to paint inside the lines so bad that at that point then you're not telling a story, or you're not telling people something that they'd be interested to engage with. You're just telling them what they already know. So I think that I am worried about that. I don't think that in the medium term that will be an effect, but it's so much in the press right now that our industry at least cannot avoid being exposed to it and reading
What
it.
can we do collectively to be able to allay such fears among the creative community?
See, I think the problem is the gestation period that it takes for new content to come out, right? And we live by precedent. So the minute new content that is painting outside the lines comes out and goes through without sort of any kind of reaction, I think that will start to build confidence. Until then, a lot of the regulation is in words, right? We're operating in the grays, and no one knows what shade of gray, whether you lean it towards the black or the white, and we're still figuring that out, Tarun. So candidly, I'm also figuring that out as I go. It doesn't detract from the stories that we're trying to tell, but I can't say that it's not in our minds.
Because
It's
I mean,
difficult
it
to-
is our responsibility to be able to create a new society and a new environment and shape mindsets, right? So creativity, by definition, needs to build the new you,
yeah.
right? And if it doesn't do that, then it's not doing justice. So like Amish has given a new definition to mythology, or Priya has given a new definition to spirituality. I think it is incumbent on people like you and me to be able to create a new, society through the stories we tell.
Absolutely.
Uh, and I think, as far as being very clear about what we want to do and what's the change we want to bring about, and being honest to it, I don't think we should worry about it too much. But yes, I do agree with you that there will be a limited period effect and a limited period overhang on something like this.
Very operationally, Tarun, what we're doing, and you're aware of this, is we're putting together this body of eminent personnel that sort of can represent the progressive mindset of India, while representing the values that Amish spoke about, being respectful towards our culture. And so as we bring those teams together, that will possibly be, the first custodians of this content and this creativity. And they start to engage and start to showcase exactly, where they think the lines are potentially. I think that's going to give people a lot more
Maybe we
confidence.
need to bring a fraternity of creative people to come
Yes.
and talk to the writers, the screenwriters at large, to be able to tell them, like Kamish was saying, that they have taken very bold measures and bold steps in creative writing without ruffling feathers or quoting controversy. Priya and Amish, your final words about how do you create this balance between creating a contrarian view and creating a new society and a new mindset without being, not being mindful about the ecosystem that we live in?
Well, I think sticking to the core, being honest and not unnecessarily embellishing things just because it's in trend or just because somebody says so, I think is the only way to success in whatever it is that you do. And at the end of the day, people want that core. What is the message that you're trying to give? And if that is simply put, without complications, without trying to avoid a controversy or be one, or without trying to comply, I think it all fits. End of the day, you have to do best for what your message is in the story, what is good for your characters, what is good for the plot, and also what fits in the budget. So if all of these things I think are noted, it's a pretty a pleasurable process. To put all these considerations is to complicate, and with a complicated mind, you can't produce creativity. Then you produce something else. So I think as a writer, as a creator, having having allowing the story and the characters to start leading you to logical twists and turns and an end, I think is a great gift and a great craft.
Thanks, Priya. Amish?
The way I see it, we are living through one of the most interesting cultural phases in India. Okay, post 1991, post the economic reforms, you know, what we pulled nearly 300 million people out of poverty. People who were troubled about how to get food on the table now have money to spend on movies, on series, on books. There's suddenly a whole new cultural paradigm that has emerged. That's what is essentially happening in India. What creative people are seeing now is essentially the ground itself is changing because the country itself is changing and at a scale that has never been seen. That's what is happening. And this change will carry on for a generation, for at least 20, 25 years more. So, in some ways, it can be the scariest phase, in some ways, the most exciting phase, right? And I think, one of the things that strikes me is that in an atmosphere like this, if we have creative people who have roots in the class that is rising, there is a rooted class of Indians who are rising now. There was a time when creative paradigms were decided only in the big cities, maybe South Mumbai, Lutyens Delhi, a few places. Creative paradigms were decided there. Now there's a whole new hundreds of millions of people who have risen, whose views impact what kind of stories will succeed. So if you have a creative person who has roots in that class, but is also able to write good stories, envelope stories that push the envelope, then you have that ideal mix. In my mind, I know this phase looks scary, but it's also one of the most exciting phases because you don't see change at this scale. It happened only once in a millennia. It's happened only in China and now here. Think of the opportunities that are possible. And just India is 20% of humanity. They're a continent more than a country. And all of them are now consumers, unlike 30 years ago. And their views obviously impact what kind of stories will succeed. So I see that as it's not that, and the country itself is rediscovering its own roots. That's what makes this period so exciting. And if we have creative guys who can crack that, yeah, then the sky's the limit, man, for us.
No, I know. Gaurav, what do you think? I mean, I think Amish and Priya made some very solid points. It is a watershed period in both society as well as, economic, the economic divide that India lived in has actually broken down, and both technology and talent has actually become democratized in this country eventually, right? And everybody can deal with technology right at the bottom of the pyramid, and equally and in the same way at the top of the pyramid, in tier two to really in the top of the line, South Bombay, South Delhi. And talent today is coming from every corner of the country or the world, and that's good, right? Look what has happened with Queen's Gambit. That story is actually a story that came out of Wattpad. Somebody put it on Wattpad, and Wattpad is actually fueling so many new stories, right? So the democratization is really true in our economy more than anywhere else, and in our society. And I think real, relevant, resonant stories will emerge, and the country will continue to thrive in this. But you, as guardian to both Woot as well as our overall OTT system, give me some final words on how you could allay all fears and encourage and motivate us to take those bold steps.
So no, I think that I agree, Amish. It is a brave, bold new world. Both what you mentioned in terms of the demographic dividend that India is seeing, but also the fact that the OTT as a platform allows you to tell thousands of stories. Right? You don't have to sort of corral towards the lowest common denominator and try and nab the most number of people. That the medium itself, the audience is there, and we have this massive talent pool that's waiting to be able to tell those stories, right? And India is a land of storytellers. So I think that there is inherent tailwinds in for us to believe that storytelling will be live and well for the years to come. I think that the genesis of some of the concern is recent regulatory conversations. But frankly, I don't think that anything that's been said so far has been outright, something that one would be dismissive about. I think they've taken a lot of the recommendations we made in terms of age appropriateness, making sure that people are taken care of, having a common minimum across platforms to be able to then, create that platform so we can again sleep home at night and grow and be creative. So I think that to my mind is really, really good. The other thing that it did really well for us, one of the things, and I alluded to it earlier, but we're a country of a lot of diverse opinions. And in the absence of this central guiding principle, there were, there were a lot of incidents where small communities would take offense to a particular thing, and that would then force makers and stuff to either fight in those courts or worse, have criminal charges filed. All of that is now under this new regulatory framework going away, where creators can actually feel comfortable that there is there will be a framework to evaluate content, but at least you're not at sort of the larger whims and fancies of
You're not going to corners all over the place and having to fight mini battles, but right,
that's the biggest. Absolutely, that I think was a really good achievement, because there was that fear factor. well before these regulations came in as well. So I think that's
I do believe this regulation will ease all of that out and give
Yes.
give anything a collective and a standard framework rather than you having to fight so many small and big battles all across. Yeah.
And that's come directly from the government. I mean, Prakash ji himself
Correct,
was
correct.
very clear on this. That's very encouraging actually for all of us.
So that's my time limit. I can see the chat and it's telling me that we need to wrap up. But thank you so much. It couldn't have been a better panel than Priya, Amit, and one of you. And I feel like really back in the middle of action to be able to do this all over again after 6 months. But thank you for having me, and thank you, IMAI, for doing such a great job.
Thank you,
Thank you.
dear
Thank you.
panelists, for taking out time to be here. On behalf of IMAI, I would like to thank the organizing committee, the speakers, our platinum partner AppsFlyer, and the audience for their immense support in making this conference a great success. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all from us. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you.
Guys.